Hello everyone, I am going to be doing a few videos today. I've been a bit lax in doing them due to various work commitments, but I'll try and catch up with the videos all on my YouTube channel today. Anyway, this game, which I'm going to show you in this video, was played 2 Thursdays ago, so a little while ago, and it was in a league match that I was playing. I was on board 1, playing against somebody who's around 2150, I think. I was white, so we started with knight f3, knight f6, the reti, and c4, g6, then knight c3. So I'm keeping options open. I could play e4, d4, g3, etc. Black is going to castle and leave their options open. They could play a kind of Grunfeld with d5 or a King's Indian with d6. I fianchetto, and d6 is played, then castles. So I've switched into an English opening, and after e5, King's Indian is elected by my opponent, to which I play d4, which now leads into the main line King's Indian. Black could try e4, but it's often quite weak, so instead knight b d7 is the move, very, very normal, and I choose e4. And there are tons and tons of games in this line. Black has a few different moves they can try, and they took, which I don't believe is the most popular move, but it's one I play as black. And that one I take with white. I've got a kind of Maroczy bind Sicilian setup. All my knights and pawns in the centre are controlling the light squares, but that means the dark squares are available for black to jump into with their knights. Rook e8, attacking my e-pawn. I'm not so sure about my move here. I think I should play b3. Try and put my bishop on b2. That would have been the smartest choice, perhaps. But instead, I choose rook e1. And then after a6, again, b3 is good, but I play bishop f4. I was trying to take them out of book and out of theory to lead it into a game where I thought I could gain an advantage as white. Knight e5, very good move. I still don't really want to play b3, so I try queen e2, defending the pawn on c4. Then h6 might not be the best move, but it does prevent bishop g5. So at this point I was thinking that perhaps I was still a little ahead, but my move rook a d1 perhaps is a bit too automatic. Maybe I should play h3, like what black's doing, preventing g4 being used for black's bishops and knights. Queen e7, and now I play b3, and if I had to play it here, I should have played it earlier and put my bishop on b2. So black again isn't really committing yet that much. They're not playing c5, not yet playing d5. b5's an option for black, and their bishop as well on c8 doesn't yet know where it wants to be. It could be on b7 in the future, d7 or e6, or even g4. And I finally realise my bishop is in the wrong place. So I move it back, and black wants to maneuver their knight and also maybe free up f5 for their pawn. I shuffle a queen to guard both my knights from danger, but this does allow bishop g4, and here this is probably where my advantage essentially goes to nothing. I try f3, but then suddenly c5 is played by black. So if I move my knight away somewhere, the f3 pawn will drop. After my kind of almost automatic gain of time on the queen, I now need to make the decision, do I give the f3 pawn away? In the end I choose not to, and I capture their bishop, they capture my knight. Can you see why queen takes pawn on d4 is a terrible move? Well, the main reason is that if you take with your queen on d4, knight f3 check will fork the king and queen, and even though I can take it with a bishop on g2, the g7 bishop for black would capture my queen on d4 if I took the pawn. So instead I guard the g-pawn. Black comes in with knight g5, they're planning knight f3 with a fork. I prevent it, put my rook on the open line. And black breaks with b5. This is a move I had not seen coming. if we trade on b5, the black rook on a8 becomes very powerful. And if I don't do anything, they'll take on c4 twice. My plan was to let the c4 pawn drop, but then take on d4 with the bishop. Black doesn't let that happen, guarding it with the knight, holding this central pawn. If I could win it for nothing, then I'd definitely have the edge. But if black can hold this pawn much longer, then black's got an advantage. And the computer, by the way, gives black an advantage from the last few moves almost the entire way through the game. I do capture now. So I've improved black's rook. The only slight compensation I have is that black's 3 pawns on the queen side, on d6, b5 and d4, are all isolated. So I may be able to pick one off and then maybe win. But a2 is being attacked by their rook. I don't let them take. Now they take the time to attack b3. And finally I choose to play radically different. Queen takes d4, where black has the very interesting move, like earlier, knight f3 check, winning my queen, like this. And then, how would you evaluate this position? This is a tough question. Black has won white's queen, so they are 9 points up, but I have won 2 minor pieces for 6 points, plus a central pawn, so that's 7 points. And I've also got initiative, with moves like knight f6 coming in the next few turns. So do you think white is better, or black is better? Or draw? Well, surprisingly, the computer still gives black as a big advantage. That's not the surprising thing. What is surprising, though, is that black has to play unbelievably accurately in this position. I believe the move was knight d7, preventing knight f6. If they do a move like, for example, rook takes pawn, then after knight f6 check, white now has the advantage. King f8 is the only move to avoid lots more checks. And here, I don't even need to take the rook, although it is tempting. I believe I can simply take this knight, and black has another few problems to solve. Their pawn, if it takes my bishop, means they will lose their queen on d8, losing all their pieces. So taking my bishop's out of the question. If they try some sort of counter-sacrifice, queen takes knight, they're not going to end up with many pieces left at the end, and I will clearly be winning. For example, taking here, taking my bishop. We're equal right now, but their rook drops at the end. Actually, we're not even equal now. I'm bishop up anyway, but now I'm a bishop and a rook up. And if black does some sort of safety move, like rook to e6, white definitely has a lot of play here. I'd be very nervous of playing this as black. For example, I could do rook takes d6, then knight e4 could be good. Knight e4 straight away looks good. Knight d5 would be good in the future, but it might drop my bishop. And bishop d4 looks pretty simple as well. And even my rook staying on f3 and me moving king h2, improving the king might even be good. Because, for example, if king h2 and black captured my knight, what would end up happening is rook takes, queen takes, rook takes, and then black is going to lose a rook. What's even more horrible is if the queen comes to c3, I believe I have the killer tactics, rook d8 double check, king moves, and then instead of taking the rook, I go bishop d4 check. And then I think black's best continuation is king h7, and there might be something stronger, but what I can see is just taking the queen. I do lose my rook at the end, but I have 2 bishops and a pawn for a rook, so I'd be very confident that I could win this. So that might explain, I'm rushing back to the original position, This may explain why black did not take the opportunity to win the white queen. He only had about 7 minutes left on his clock. I had about 30. As usual, I'm spending not as much time on moves. Instead, knight takes b3 was chosen, which still keeps a small advantage for black. So overall, in practical terms, it was the more sensible move, although I'm not sure I'd have been able to resist taking the queen if I was black. I now do save the queen. I won't have enough attack if I lose it for just one piece. Black defends everything. I come over with the queen, trying to win that b pawn. And then I realised if I take it, rook b8 will line up with my queen that's just taken the pawn on b5 and my bishop on b2, so I could be in trouble. I therefore get the bishop off the line, preparing to take the pawn next go, but black improves their knight with knight c4. All of black's moves are either the best or second best, so my opponent here is managing the middle game very well. I'm still trying to hold on, hoping that if I lose the a pawn I can maybe get the b pawn at the end, but not so. The knight does guard the b pawn. So now I try to pressure the knight, and black comes back with knight c4 going for my queen, giving me the b pawn eventually at the end. Black improves with the rook and lines up with my bishop again. And just to avoid all the checks, I move the king to h1. This will hopefully leave me with a survivable endgame. And also my bishop is being guarded on c3 with my knight on d5, so I'm not yet losing everything. Now black does start to play very actively though with queen g5, and I try to block the queen's path to improvements. Black is now concentrating on the king's side with knight to e3. I've got to be aware of the tactics. So first I kick away the black queen, force it back, then gain a tempo on the queen again. And here I realise that if I take their knight on e3, which I had been planning to do, I drop the queen. So we trade queens first. But then if I take the knight on e3, I lose my rook on a1. Knight e7 then. And I win the rook using a fork with my check. Lose my rook, but then capture the pawn on d6. So I was now starting to feel more optimistic. I have the bishop pair, which isn't as useful as it was because all the pawns are on the same side. But it could be useful in controlling some key areas of the board. I can easily control light squares and black squares simultaneously. But the only bad thing for me is my e-pawn is isolated, meaning that if black controls the square in front of the e4 pawn, which it does, they can simply put a knight on e5 and I can never drive it away. But instead, bishop e5 is played to attack my knight and g-pawn. I guard the knight. Black takes one pawn, and I thought they would take another one on g3, but instead, trade, going for a drawn endgame. And here, rook e8, attacking the e-pawn. I come back, it's already defended. Knight to e5, controlling the square in front. And I finkesso both bishops with, again, a fairly comfortable draw. Only thing I have to watch out for is black perhaps winning the e-pawn, which could be very annoying if I don't play correctly. So this move, very good from black, knight d1, capturing the only bishop I had that was any good. And now black's knight might actually be equal to my bishop, if not better. So I started to get a bit nervous again that my bishop is only a defensive piece, while black can just sit there doing nothing the whole game, because I'm never going to be able to mount an attack. But fortunately for me, they were low on time, so they offered a draw, and I had to take it. So overall, not my best game, but I didn't make any massive blunders. I just made a pig's ear of the middle game, and they were able to outplay me, leading to a position where I think only black could really win that at the end. but I held it, I didn't lose. It's at least some good news. So that was my game 2 Thursdays ago, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.